I guess what I'm trying to say is that if I can change, and you can change, everybody can change!
It's a fucking shit show! What you think you see, what you think you hear, that's what it's about. Mood and atmosphere. No, it's fucking garbage. It's garbage. Mood and atmosphere. Now that I really like. That's what I'm looking for. That's what I want to see. Hey folks, how you doing? Dave McRae here. Yes, that's right. Today we are talking about Rocky, the Rocky series, the Rocky franchise as a whole, including Creed and Creed 2, of course, the two spin-off films to the original Rocky franchise. And I will be giving my ranking on all of the Rocky films, including Creed and Creed 2, at the end of this video. And the reason why I decided to do this video is because, well, number one, I don't think I've talked about Rocky on this channel, and I'm a big Rocky fan. And number two is I finally had the chance to see Creed 2 over the holidays. My girlfriend was very nice enough to treat me to Creed 2 on Christmas Day. So now that I've seen all of the Rocky films, even though Creed and Creed 2, it's its own thing, it's, you know what I'm saying. But now that I've seen all the films, I want to sort of talk about them. So let's get right into it. Okay. I think the best of the franchise is still the original Rocky from 1976. And the reason why I think it's the best is because at that time, there's a lot of things surrounding that movie that make it so awesome. Despite the fact of the story of Rocky, how Rocky came to be, how the movie got made, how Sly wrote the script on like a legal pad and a pencil or pen or something like that. He had no money. He was a nobody before Rocky. I mean, he had done some minor things, but he was a nobody. He had to sell his dog for like 20 or 30 bucks or whatever the hell it was, just so he could eat, which after the success of Rocky, he actually bought the dog back, but that's a side note. He wrote this thing and he knew he wanted to play Rocky because there were a lot of parallels to the character of Rocky and real life Sylvester Stallone at that time. And a lot of producers who were interested in what he had written, there were a lot that weren't, but those that weren't interested in him playing Rocky. They wanted somebody else, somebody more seasoned, somebody more established to play Rocky. They're like, okay, well, we like this story. That's kind of a cool idea. We really like this, but who the fuck are you? No. But he held out. He held out. And of course, finally, he was given the opportunity, but they had like, I think barely $1 million to make this movie, which even at that time was not a lot of money, especially with what it all entailed. And, but the reason why Rocky was so successful was not because it was about boxing. Boxing was the vehicle, okay, in which the story is being told. But Rocky could have been about, Rocky Balboa, you know, could have been a race car driver, a hockey player, a football player, a basketball player, a baseball player. He could have been anything. The reason why that movie was so successful, the actual film itself, despite of all the wonderful romantic kind of things of how it came to be, like, wow, holy shit, is because it was, and the actual moral and theme that ran through all of the Rocky films is it's about not giving up. It's about heart and grit and determination. Rocky Balboa was not a great fighter. He wasn't a great fighter at all. There's that quote at the end of Rocky 3 where Apollo Creed says, hey, listen, you fight great, but I'm a great fighter. And those are two completely different things. They are. You can be, you can fight great, you know, but to be a great fighter is different because there are tiny nuances and idiosyncrasies and things that a great fighter knows how to do and what to do and how to move and how to get out of certain situations that somebody who just simply fights great may not know, either because of experience, because, you know, of being set in their ways or, you know, whatever it is. But what Rocky had that a lot of people don't have, and all the opponents didn't have that Apollo Creed faced, was heart, determination, never giving up. And even though many of us, most of you probably watching this video right now, we can't relate to boxing necessarily. We're not boxers. We've never been in a ring, but we can take the moral and the theme of Rocky, the original Rocky film now from 1976. We can take that moral and that theme and apply it to our own lives. We can be the Rocky Balboa in whatever it is, whether it's voiceover, filmmaking, to be the CEO of your company, the best hockey player you want to be, best baseball player you want to be, the best mother or father you want to be, whatever it is, right? You can take the moral, the theme of the Rocky movie and apply it to your life. And that's why we can live vicariously through the Rocky character, because it's not about boxing. It's about never giving up, being determined, having the heart, the grit. He kept getting up. Apollo Creed, nobody had gone the distance with Apollo Creed. Nobody had, but Rocky did. Rocky didn't win that fight. Remember that in the original Rocky film from 1976, he lost the fight. He went the distance and he lost via split decision, but he still lost, right? He lost on points, but he went the distance. Nobody had ever done that before. Nobody had. Nobody went the distance with Apollo Creed, which of course is the catalyst now that goes into the Rocky sequel. But there's that great scene in the original Rocky where Rocky comes back from the gym, I think, and he lies in bed, this little twin bed, right, in his apartment with Adrian, because Adrian, I think it was after Adrian got so fucking pissed off at Paulie because he threw the turkey out the window, that she moves in with Rocky, and he's lying in bed, and I forget the actual little monologue, but he's basically saying that, I just want to go the distance to show that I'm not just another bum from the street. Do you know what I mean? That's it. That's the moral of the story. Now, make it about boxing, make it about hockey, make it about whatever the fuck you want. Now, boxing was really popular, certainly in the 70s. It's not nearly as popular nowadays, mostly because of the shit that goes on and all the bullshit that goes on with boxing. And of course, the UFC as well has sort of helped in dropping boxing's popularity down a bit. But certainly it could have been about anything. So that's why the story of Rocky Balboa is so good, because Sly wrote this story. There's great character development, and the relationship between him and Adrian and Paulie and Apollo, and this whole love story that's building between him and Adrian. It's like the boxing, like it's a side note. We are emotionally attached to these characters. We fall in love with this dynamic between Adrian and Rocky, and we're rooting for them to succeed. This simple guy from Philadelphia is just trying to make his way, in this shy, introverted pet store girl, and this obnoxious, her obnoxious drunk brother, and this, like, we get really attached to these characters. And if we weren't attached to these characters, we wouldn't give a fuck about what happens in that boxing match. And that's why, for the vast majority of the Rocky film from 1976, there is no boxing. There's no boxing going on. There's no boxing whatsoever. It's all about this character development and building the story between these characters and these relationships, about how this potential fight, how this pending fight is affecting them. And that is what's just so awesome about that first movie. You didn't need a sequel. You did not need to do a sequel to that movie. I understand why they did, but the moral and message of the Rocky character was solidified and completed in that first movie. It was. Now, the smart thing that Sylvester Stallone did in the sequel to Rocky in 1979 was he took that moral and that message and kept it going. But he also kept the character development going, because now, talking about Rocky 2, we can say that, okay, well, he's gone the distance, right? Apollo Creed thinks this is a fucking joke. Like, no fucking way. There's no fucking way that this guy, I know he went the distance, but come on. I must have been taking him lightly. It's this southpaw nobody bum from the streets of Philadelphia, and he goes the distance with the world champion. Fuck off. No way. I want a rematch, because I want to prove to the world that's not, that's a complete fluke. Right? Well, now Rocky, he's not rich or anything, but he has this newfound fame, having gone the distance with Apollo Creed. So, he's getting some endorsements, or there's some people that want him in a couple of commercials. And we're seeing what Sylvester Stallone did was he continued to write the narrative and develop the characters, and see how this newfound fame and these new circumstances, because of the fallout of what happened in the original Rocky are affecting these characters and affecting the relationship between Adrian and Rocky and Apollo and Paulie, and that's really good stuff. That's really good stuff. Rocky 2, again, it's not about boxing. It's about these characters, and we're getting to know these characters more. We see Rocky propose to Adrian. We see them get married, and I think that's in Rocky 2, right? Yeah, it is Rocky 2. And we see their relationship grow, but how this new circumstance is affecting them. So it worked. And Rocky 2 in 1979 was a huge, not only box office success, but it was a critical success as well. Many critics were like, well, it was kind of the same thing in some ways, but the expansion on the characters is what made it. That's what made it. Seeing these characters that we fell in love with, how they interact and how they deal with these new circumstances. And it was a success. Now it's Rocky 3 that begins sort of this interesting turn in the Rocky series. Rocky 3, is where we bring in a real villain into the movie. Like Apollo Creed was not a villain. Apollo Creed was not a villain per se, right? He was a boxer. He was a fighter, right? Well, now we bring in Mr. T as Clubber Lang, and he's got that real villain, that larger than life sort of ominous presence and villain to the movie. So we start to kind of go a little hokey. And of course we have the charity match with a relatively unknown at the time, Hulk Hogan, which is like, okay, like it's fun to watch. I like Rocky 3. I do. But certainly the boxing side of it, that side of it has become a little more sensational. But the reason why Rocky 3 works is because the grounded character development between the characters and how they're interacting with these new circumstances remains grounded. Okay, so we're still emotionally attached to the realistic sort of presentation of Rocky and Adrian and Apollo and Mickey and Paulie. Their stories aren't becoming sensational. They're just reacting to these somewhat sensational circumstances, and they themselves recognize in the movie that these circumstances are a little sensational. Like when Rocky fights Hulk Hogan, right? Even he himself in the movie is kind of like, well, this is kind of like, this is kind of silly. It's just for charity, just for charity. I mean, it's like, so it's kind of like he's almost like on our side, like this is kind of fucking weird, but okay. So we kind of forgive it a little bit because it's almost not taking itself too seriously. However, the heart of that movie is having Mickey die. When Mickey dies, that was the heart of that movie. And you needed Mickey to die, because without Mickey dying in that movie, I don't know how the movie would have, like, that's what gives it, okay. Like, you're kind of going along, but now it's kind of like, Mickey died. Wow. And then Apollo, he comes back, right? Because we haven't seen him. He comes back and kind of takes over. And now that real big moral theme that ran rampant through the first movie and the second movie about not giving up, about heart, about, grit and determination. And, you got to keep going, you got to keep going, you got to keep going, whatever your boxing match is in life. You know what I mean? Whatever it is in life, you got to keep going. You got to keep fighting. That theme suddenly, when Mickey dies, it's boom, we're back. Do you know what I mean? And even though we're in this sensational kind of Clubber Lang era, we can become emotionally attached to it. We can get on board with it, even though things around it are a little kind of, we can get on board with it. So it worked. It worked. Now, Rocky 3 isn't quite as revered as Rocky 2, and nowhere near, of course, as the original Rocky, because like I said, it kind of starts to take this cartoony kind of turn. But it's still, it still worked. It still worked. And of course, in that movie, Rocky has some money now. He's the champion, and he's being a little lackadaisical with his fights. He didn't really train as hard as he should have in the ways that he should have with his first fight with Clubber Lang, and he lost. It's almost like what Mike Tyson did with Buster Douglas in 1990. Tyson didn't train for that fight. Douglas was like a something to something underdog, 25-1 or whatever the hell he was. Of course, if you bet on Buster Douglas, you're probably still reaping the benefits of that today. But of course, he lost. Had Tyson actually trained for that fight, might have been a different story. Taking him seriously might have been a different a different story, but he didn't. So that's sort of where we see Rocky in Rocky 3. He's not taking him seriously. So by the time we get to Rocky 4, that's when things... Now, Rocky 4 is actually my favorite Rocky movie, and it's probably a lot of your favorite Rocky movies as well. But Rocky 4 is my favorite because it's sort of like, yeah, we're going there, and we make no apologies for it. And Rocky 4 is, of course, where they bring in Dolph Lundgren as Ivan Drago. And now we have this real, larger-than-life, indestructible villain. We have this Darth Vader kind of character in a Rocky series. And it's kind of like, what is going on here, right? And but the reason why it works is because they played up the Cold War angle. They played the us versus them, the them versus us. And we as people can live vicariously, not necessarily through the Cold War, but through, there's always been somebody in our life that we hate, that we want to get back at, that we want to get revenge on, that we want to fucking little bit pissing us off, whatever it is, right? We can relate to that. So that part of Rocky, that revenge, that redemption, that I'm going to get you, that we can't do this anymore, and us versus them versus us, whatever it is in your life, whatever that us versus them in your life is, you can live vicariously through that. And of course, the stakes, right? He kills Apollo Creed. Well, there's that bottom, right? That bottom that we had in Rocky 3. Now we have that bottom in Rocky 4. And remember, these movies are all written by Sylvester Stallone. He understands this character. He understands, even when he went a little sensational, he understood what he needed there to get people on board, to get people, okay, we're going a little sensational with this indestructible 6'10" Russian guy, but we're gonna milk it through the stuff that you know and love about the characters, and therefore we're gonna get you on board. And that's what he did. Rocky 4 is just fun. It's got an awesome soundtrack, amazing soundtrack with all the shit. And it's got that us versus them thing, right? It's really awesome. But it is the most sensational and the most out there of the Rocky series. And it's sort of, you could say that Rocky 4, if you're a big fan of the original Rocky movie, you would look to Rocky 4 as the movie where they jump the shark. That saying goes, right? Or the Indiana Jones saying of nuke the fridge. You would definitely, Rocky 4 is where they jump the shark. Because what ended up happening with the abysmal Rocky 5 is they started to go back to the roots. But in my opinion, they did it half-assly and too quickly. There wasn't enough time between, between Rocky 4 and Rocky 5 to be able to justify that. And there were a lot of there was enough time. There was 5 years, but they made a lot of continuity mistakes and a lot of things and character mistakes that people just didn't grab onto. I mean, of course, you have Sage Stallone in Rocky 5, who's his real life son, of course, passed away a few years ago. But he was like 6 or 7 years older than the kid who played Rocky's son in Rocky 4. And this is only like the timeline between 4 and 5, even though it's 5 years in the real world, is only supposed to be like 4 or 5 days. So you have like this 14-year-old kid that shows up at the airport, but yet the kid 4 or 5 days ago was like 9. Awful mistake. I know you want to get your son in there, but listen, you don't make those decisions. Story comes first. It was a bad creative decision that Sly made. And of course you have this Don King type character, in Duke, and then, the whole idea of having this punk-ass but talented kid that's coming up that wants Rocky to try. And Rocky, the original idea for the ending of Rocky 5 was Rocky was going to die. And of course they axed that because it goes against the sort of whole moral of what Rocky was all about. But nobody really bought into, like, they tried to go back, they tried to ground it because, as I said, Rocky 4 was the sensational sort of big, huge thing. And I think Stallone realized when he wanted to end the series, he's like, well, I've gone as far as I can go. Like, I can't go more than Rocky 4. What the hell am I going to be doing? Right? I'm like, Rocky 4 is sort of that ceiling where it's like, well, like, I can't get any more sensational than this because then it's going to be really fucking ridiculous and nobody's going to take it seriously. So he tried to go back to the roots with Rocky 5, which is why he's got no money. He's on the streets of Philadelphia again. He's wearing his old attire, he's going back, but just nobody bought it. Because not enough time had gone by, and a lot of the creative decisions they made with Rocky 5 just didn't feel organic. It felt very synthetic, very forced, and there were a lot of things that just didn't... Nobody wanted to see Rocky in a street fight. Nobody wanted to see Rocky not fighting. Nobody wanted to see that. And so it sucked, man. It really did suck. There's some redeeming qualities about it. One of the great things I love about that movie is actually the end credit sequence and Elton John's song, The Measure of a Man. I think it's a great song. I love that song. And it plays really well to the end credits. But sadly, it's such a powerful message and such a powerful song in such a shitty movie. So it's unfortunate that song was sort of lost in the ether to such a garbage film at the end of the day. But now, having said that, of course, 16 years go by, and Sylvester Stallone knows that Rocky is one of the most iconic characters in the history of motion pictures. He's become this archetype for passion and for believing in yourself and never giving up. That's incredible. That's amazing. He's entered the pop culture consciousness as just this symbol, which is amazing. So he wanted to end Rocky on his terms in the right way, which is why nobody believed in him. No, I mean, somebody gave him money, obviously, to go do this movie. But everybody thought it was going to be a critical failure. Everybody thought it was going to be a financial failure. And it actually ended up being the complete opposite. Rocky Balboa came out in 2006 to critical and box office success. And it was a really good movie because he went back to the roots of the original Rocky from 1976. And enough time had gone by because remember, Rocky V is not canon in Rocky Balboa. So really, in terms of the character and story continuity, this is the first movie since 1985's Rocky IV. So even though it's the first Rocky movie in 16 years, in the story, it's the first Rocky movie in 21 years. So we're now seeing Rocky at a different point in his life. And what bottom does he have in Rocky Balboa? Adrian is dead. Adrian died of cancer. And although Talia Shire, who plays Adrian, was kind of miffed. She was kind of pissed when she found out that Sylvester Stallone was writing her character out and that her character was going to die. After seeing the movie, she actually has changed her mind. She says, no, I get it. Like, yes, I was disappointed because obviously I would love to be in, it's my character. It's what I'm most known for. And I'd be more than happy to reprise it. But she understood, for the sake of the story, why her character needed to be axed, because it gives so much weight and so much bottom, far more than Mickey did, far more than Apollo did. To have Adrian's character die is like, wow, because Adrian was Rocky's life, and it's what drives his heart in Rocky Balboa. And seeing all those scenes of, reminiscing and the memories, we all can live vicariously through that moment. If you're married, if you're in love, if you obviously don't want that to happen, right? You don't want your significant other to pass away or, to be without them. And we all can live through that. And it's tough, to think about that and to think that one day, either I'm going to go first or she's going to go first. One of us is going to, and if we're not, of course, killed at the same time. So that heart and that bottom that he gave the Rocky Balboa story, where Rocky is at this point in his life, in his late 50s, early 60s, it's real life, man. It's what happens in life. And it was very moving and very emotional. And that movie needed that. It needed that. So Talia Shire now, of course, says, "Oh, I get it. Like, I understand now. It's having seen the movie, I'm totally cool. Like, it's amazing." And of course, and that brings having that, you can now then, of course, that's the catalyst to the relationship between Rocky and his son and how it's a little strained and how his son feels like he's living in his father's shadow, but that he's a little, selfish and doesn't appreciate his mom and doesn't go to and you can add all that in there. There's hardly any boxing in Rocky Balboa, just like there was hardly any boxing in the original Rocky movie or even Rocky 2, right? It's about the relationships. It's about the love and the passion and the never giving up. And then, of course, there's that what has become iconic scene now from Rocky Balboa where he's talking to his son about how winning is done out on the sidewalk outside of Adrian's restaurant. And you can YouTube it if you haven't seen it. I'm sure you know the one I'm talking about. But that itself is not only what Rocky Balboa is about, that movie, that's what Rocky's about. That's the message of the story. So they went back to those roots so many years later, and that's why Rocky Balboa was so successful, is because it's the tried and true thing that each and every one of us can relate to. We all can't relate to Rocky necessarily, but we can, in terms of boxing, I mean, but we certainly can relate to whatever our boxing is in our own life, and never giving up, and passion and tenacity and getting back up when we're knocked down to get back up, right? And because that's what he says to his son. No one's going to hit harder than life. But it's not about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done. That's the message. That's Rocky. That's the message. Whether it's boxing, your life, your work, your parents, your whatever. That's how winning is done. And that's and they went back to that. They went back to that and reminded people about that, which got really lost in Rocky V. Yeah, I mean, it's there, but it's not there, if you know what I'm saying. So that's why it was so successful. So personally, although I like Creed and I like Creed 2, I think they're very well put together movies. And they keep that theme and that thing running through it. I really don't think you needed to do Creed, and I don't think you needed to do Creed 2 at all. Rocky Balboa from 2006 puts a really nice bow on the Rocky franchise and the Rocky story and the moral and the message. That last scene when he, puts those roses on her grave and says, well, yo, Adrian, we did it, or well, Adrian, we did it. I forget what she says. And then he walks away and he just disappears, and you see, the grave. It's so beautiful. End of story. Done. And I know this is a spin-off, but it's done. It's done. You didn't need to do Creed or Creed 2. However, they did. And are the movies good? Yeah, they're really good. Both of them are really good. I think the first Creed is better than the second Creed, but I think they're both really good. And personally, having seen Creed 2 now, I can say, don't do any more. Don't do any more Creed movies. It's done. It's done. He avenged his father's death, so to speak. How much higher can you get? He's the champion and he's avenged his father's death. That's it. I mean, if you had a series planned out of like 4 or 5 Creed movies, you may have wanted to leave the Creed 2 story until the very end. So you might have peaked too soon if you have a bunch of Creed movies that you want to do. You might have peaked too soon. And nobody wants to see Creed fight Clubber Lang's son. That has nothing to do with Creed. Nothing. I don't want to see Creed fighting Rocky people. That's done. And Sylvester Stallone has come out basically and said that, yeah, I'm done. Remember at the end of Creed 2 when Rocky puts his fist up like this, and Creed is in the ring and they, fist bump. I forget what he says, but he's passing the torch. It's done. I'm done, man. I'm done. That's what he's saying. That's what he's saying right there. So if they do another Creed movie, it would not surprise me if Sylvester Stallone was not in that movie. It wouldn't surprise me at all. And quite frankly, I don't think he needs to be in that movie. All right? Because Creed, if you want to continue with Creed, there comes a time where you got to leave the nest. And if Creed can stand on its own without Rocky, and if this box office success, if you want to prove that the box office and critical success of Creed and Creed 2 has very little to do, well, not little, but if you want to prove that you can achieve that box office and critical success without Sylvester Stallone's Rocky, eventually you got to leave the nest. Nobody wants to see you fighting Clubber Lang's son. The fuck is that? That has nothing to do with Creed. He's got no ill will towards Clubber Lang. That doesn't make any sense. Makes no fucking sense creatively, so don't do it. I personally think Creed 2, the Creed story, is done. It's done. And we can look at Rocky going home, visiting his son, rebuilding that relationship. That I personally think the ending of Rocky Balboa from 2006 is stronger. And I think it's better because it's always been about him and Adrian right from the very beginning. And to end with him and Adrian, yes, it's a complete circle. But he does have a son. He did have a son in the earlier Rocky films, which we've seen. And to end on that note in Creed 2, Okay. All right. Fine. Okay, fine. Cool. That's it. I'm done. I like Creed. I like Creed 2. They're good movies. They're good boxing movies. And they carry the theme of Rocky, the not giving up, the believing, they carry that through. And they're really good films. But you don't need to do anymore. You don't need to do any more, certainly don't need to do any more Rocky movies, of course, but you certainly don't need to do any more Creed movies. I'm done. That's it. So my ranking would be this. I would place the original Rocky from 1976 as the best, no doubt about it. It's not my favorite Rocky movie, but objectively looking at the series, it is a complete story in and of itself. You did not need to do any more movies. The moral of the story, the message of the story is complete in that first Rocky movie, and everything else that surrounds the Rocky movie from 1976, how it got made, the odds were against, Stallone as a writer and as an actor, and everything that just surrounds that first Rocky movie is so inspiring. Not just the movie and the characters in the movie, but how the movie was made is inspiring as well. So it's just great. It's just awesome. Followed by Rocky Balboa from 2006, followed by Rocky II from 1979, followed by Creed, followed by Rocky IV, which is my favorite Rocky movie, even though I think it's probably the fourth best in the series in terms of, when we talk about quality and story and things like that. It is a little, it's the one that definitely is the most cartoony and jumping the shark, and it is what it is, right? But certainly it's my favorite of the series for the reasons that I stated, followed by Rocky III, followed by Creed II, and then followed by way at the end, 1990s Rocky V. Now, the reason why I put a big gap between Creed II and Rocky V is so that you guys know that although Creed II comes after Rocky V, I am certainly not saying that Creed II is anywhere near the quality of Rocky V. I wanted to put a huge gap between those movies because realistically, you probably could put Creed 2 anywhere in there in the mix of where Creed is or Rocky 4 is. But this is just how I feel about the series right now. Again, I only saw Creed 2 on Christmas Day, which was about a week or so ago as of shooting this video. So maybe my feelings will change on it in the coming weeks and months. But as right now, this is sort of how I feel about the series and where I think the movies fall in terms of their quality and their impact, at least on me. But my favorite, I have a guilty pleasure to Rocky IV from 1985. Anyways, folks, my name's Dave McRae. Comment below and let me know your thoughts. What did you think about what I had to say about the Rocky series and the Rocky franchise and what Rocky means to each and every one of us? What are your favorite Rocky movies? Is your favorite Rocky movie Rocky IV? Maybe it's Rocky III. Maybe it's even Rocky V. Maybe it's Rocky V. Comment below and let me know. I want to know your thoughts on the Rocky series. If you want to follow me on Facebook, you can at facebook.com/manythingsdavemcrae. The link is in the description. That's where I tend to post in the meantime and in between time when I'm not posting here. If you want to help support the channel each and every month via Patreon, that link is in the description, as well as some other links to my IMDb, my website, Twitter, all that kind of jazz. That's in the description as well. So yeah, I got some juicy stuff coming in the new year. It's New Year's Eve as of shooting this video, so have a wonderful new year. Stay safe. Don't drink and drive, folks. And I will talk to you guys soon. Comment below and let me know what are your favorite Rocky movies. Cheers.